Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from what we conceived? Either way, we got...
Hey everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back with the Solartopia Green Power and Wellness Show here at PRN.FM. We have been running for many, many months the Zoom call for the Grassroots Emergency Election Protection meeting, but we are taking a couple of weeks off and we're going to stick with energy now. We have two incredibly important people with us to spend the hour on talking about nuclear power and renewable energy, both of which are very, very much in the spotlight. Today, we have got news from France, the so-called poster child. Well, let me tell you first, our guest from San Luis Obispo is the great Linda Seeley. Although she's only 19 years old, but she's been working on nuclear power for more than 50, and is the mainstay of the movement at the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant, which I consider the number one danger on the world, on the planet today, to the future of the human race. And there is much to report on what's going on at Diablo Canyon. And then we have Ron Leonard, one of the great mainstays of the solar energy industry in the United States, with a ton to report on the latest attempts by the fossil nuclear industry to kill renewable energy and certainly rooftop solar, which is the ultimate threat, as far as they're concerned, to the centralized fossil nuclear utility industry. So that's going to be our focus. We're going to stick with the nuclear until we cover the issue and certainly what's happening at Diablo Canyon. I will tell you there is a miracle underway right now where we're broadcasting from in Southern California, which is it's raining. And it's been raining for like a week, and it's a serious rain to the point where I feel like I'm in Ohio again. The temperatures have been 40s and 50s for the last week, which of course is when my daughters came out to visit. But hey, I'll take it. This has really been phenomenal. It's raining now for like the third straight day. And, Linda, you as a Californian certainly understand. I don't know if it's raining in San Luis Obispo, but God knows we need it here. Are you getting rain up there?
Actually, we have a break in the rain right now, and it's absolutely beautiful, but it's supposed to move in later this afternoon, and it's been raining for a week.
Well, let's hope the reservoirs get at least up to half.
Yeah.
And apparently they've had one of the biggest snowstorms in history in the Sierra Nevadas, which is also for the water pack. So let's hope this carries it through, because I've been here for, I don't know, about 6 months. I haven't seen rain like this. I saw one day of rain, and now it's really pouring. So those of you in the rest of the country, I hope you appreciate how critical this really is. I have started to build a very large boat in the back here, but progress is slow. So anyway, and I do have a grandson named Noah. We'll leave it at that. So Linda Seeley, there is much news about Diablo Canyon. As we know, a deal was reached a number of years ago to shut Diablo Canyon, the Unit 1 by 24, Unit 2 by 25. And now all these morons talking about keeping it open longer. Do you want to fill us in on what the realities are? Yeah,
well, we have some hope right now. The morons actually include the Biden administration, including Jennifer Granholm, the Secretary of Energy, who is advocating for keeping Diablo Canyon open for 10 years after its to the date of its closure, which, as you said, is 24 and 25. I don't know how he or the Biden administration came to this conclusion that it could be safe or sane to keep Diablo Canyon open. Nothing has changed there. It's only gotten worse. First of all, one thing that's really important is that many of the seasoned workers at Diablo Canyon, the operators, the technicians, the engineers, et cetera, are leaving. They're retiring. The institutional knowledge that's been there, and it's a quirky place out there, that is being lost even as we speak. Apparently the radiation protection out there is less than ideal, and we can't talk about that too much right now, but apparently there are a lot of problems with radiation protection to the workers there. As you know, Harvey, and as you've talked about over and over again, the Unit 1 reactor vessel was built in 1967, and it is...
Were they on acid when they built it?
Probably. It is, I think by now it's probably the #1 most embrittled reactor vessel in the whole country. And what that means is that if they had to do a cold shutdown, like in an emergency, that if they flooded it with cold water, because it's brittle, it would break like if you put a glass of boiling water into a bag of ice. You just can't do that with something that's brittle. So there's that. The spent fuel pools are so overcrowded. They're at least 3 times their original capacity, and they're just loading them up more and more. There's that. The dry cask storage space is out there, but it only has enough storage space on it for the current amount of dry casks that they're planning to load after the thing shuts down. So if they would keep it open longer, they'd have to build another dry cask storage facility, which is insane. There's the once-through cooling, where it kills billions and billions of fish larvae and microorganisms. The things that are necessary to the health of the ocean. That once-through cooling system kills everything that comes through it. They take in and discharge 2.5 billion gallons of water every single 24 hours, and they've been doing that for 40 years. And
how much hotter? The water that they send back into the ocean, 2.5 billion gallons a day. That's for the 2 reactors, right? For both of them?
Right.
How much hotter is it than the natural temperature of the sea?
Just around 20 degrees hotter.
Okay.
So you talk about, they say it doesn't contribute to global warming, right?
Yeah, right. Right. How does an atomic reactor burning at 570 degrees Fahrenheit not contribute to global warming?
Exactly. That is completely insane, Harvey. And plus, it lets out steam constantly into the atmosphere. I thought steam was hot. I don't know. Last time I reckon.
No, this is cold steam. This is right, Ron. I mean, this is steam it's environmentally safe steam.
Right.
And the radiation is good for you.
Right. It makes you stronger, right?
Yes.
And then we've got the seawater intake structure that's very vulnerable. The oceans are rising, right?
Yeah.
And the seawater intake structure is, that thing is built exactly to the specifications that were true in 1970, not true today. The ocean is rising as we speak. And so that thing is not going to function for that much longer.
And of course, a tsunami would wipe that thing right out.
That's right. Oh, my God. And not to mention the fact that Diablo Canyon is still built at the nexus of 13 earthquake faults. And 2 of those earthquake faults are major and active. So and we haven't had an earthquake there, but, you know.
Now, all it takes is one. I will say, you know, I saw one of the most painful sacrifices I've ever made for the anti-nuclear movement. It was a night, and it was the Cavaliers and the Warriors in the finals. It was one of the best games in the history of the NBA. And but I had been told that this movie, San Andreas, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, was made about a major earthquake on the San Andreas Fault, but it made no mention whatsoever of any nuclear power plants. I mean, they showed San Francisco underwater, for God's sakes. They showed Los Angeles breaking into, but there was no mention whatsoever of any nuclear power plants. And I didn't believe it. So before I could talk about it, I had to go see the film, which was horrifying. I mean, if you ever have to go see that film, bring something to read. It's like incredibly boring. And so, and by God, there was zero mention of any nuclear power plants in California in this giant film about the San Andreas blowing the place to pieces. So I guess you have nothing to worry about.
I think that's because most people actually don't know there's a nuclear power plant in California, and people around here think it already shut down.
I know. Barbara Boxer thinks it's shut down. I was at a fundraiser, and I got up, and Barbara Boxer was speaking, and I talked about San Andreas, about Diablo Canyon. She said, "What are you talking about? It's already shut." I mean,
how about that?
How about that? So when is the next fuel outage for, and Ron and Leonard, I appreciate your patience. Thank you for sticking with us on this, but I know you're interested in Diablo Canyon. Oh, yeah. When is the next fuel outage for Unit 1, and how many more fuel loads do they have to 2024? It could be more than 2.
Well, no, there's one in March, and there's another one in October. And I can't remember if the March one is Unit 1 or Unit 2. Yeah.
Well, we're still begging the governor of California to just inspect the Unit 1 to see what the embrittlement situation is. And we got no response.
No response. And the governor of California, to his credit, did say last week that even despite the pressure from the Biden administration to keep it open, he's still sticking with the plan to let it shut down. So we'll see. You know, I don't trust any of them.
Well, you have to remember that Diablo Canyon is operated by the brilliant and efficient and trustworthy company that burned down half of Northern California, and it exploded a neighborhood in San Bruno. I believe that PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, is the only company in the country, if not the world, that has been twice convicted of involuntary manslaughter.
Right.
That's some kind of record, right?
I think it's a world record.
Yeah.
But PG&E says they are not planning it open. So, and I extracted a promise, but that doesn't make any difference.
Right. I think actually I think keeping Diablo Canyon open would be PG&E's worst nightmare. I mean, I think there's probably enough management people in there who know how bad that plant is. But who knows?
So all we can do is hope and pray, keep the pressure on, write to the governor, tell him he made the right decision to shut down Diablo Canyon, write to Jennifer Granholm, the Secretary of Energy, and tell her she's wrong-headed on this, and see if we can get through to her. I've been trying to get through to Jennifer Granholm, but it's been impossible so far.
Well, I'm glad the Mothers for Peace are still going. You're still having your meetings?
Oh yeah, we're still going strong.
How
Although
long
we do need younger members. Huh?
how long has the Mothers for Peace been going? When was your first meeting?
1967.
Jeez, 19. So when you met at your first Mothers for Peace meeting, did you have a lava lamp and a hookah, or were you
I imagine I wasn't there. I didn't move to California till '82.
Oh,
But Jane Swanson, our president, she was there at the second meeting in 1967. I can't see her with a lava lamp and a hookah, but you never know. I didn't know her back then.
well, I was arrested at Diablo Canyon in 1984, just before they opened it, and we were called the Late in the Day Affinity Group because we considered ourselves in our late 30s and 40s to be geezers at the time. So, there you go. But I had 3 lovely nights in the San Luis Obispo jail. It was, they had us outside because the jail was packed. And I will say that orange is not my color, but it was a very good experience. And I have to tell you that I went back there a few years ago with 2 of my daughters to the gates of San Luis at San Onofre. Sorry, I'll get them straight here. To the gates of Diablo Canyon, and a security guy came out, and I told him that I had been arrested and would he take a picture of me with my daughters, and he was quite friendly and 40 years younger than me, and thought it was pretty cool that I had been arrested there. And I asked him if he wanted to arrest me again. He said, "No, we're busy today. Come back another time." So, so what do you think the odds are? So they have one more refueling. I'm assuming they have 2 more refuelings before it shuts in '84. Would that be?
Oh, at least. No, they have more than that because this is only going to be 22. They do a refueling in each reactor every 18 months.
Well, so, it's 20. It's now 22. 18 months is that would be 3 years. I think there's only 2 more refuelings. Do the math. I mean,
from your to God's ear, I hope so.
Well, if they refuel let's say they refuel in March of 22, they go 18 months. That'll be February of 24. I think there's only maybe 1 or 2.
That's for one of the units, and the other one is refueling in March.
Well, we should find out. We should find out. I do want to report, and I know you know this, both you guys, that serious problems have arisen in the French nuclear industry. Now, you've got Germany and France sitting right next to each other. Germany is about to, this year, well, in 22, will shut its last reactors. There will, after 22, I believe that there will be no more operating nuclear power plants in Germany. They had, I think, 22, 23, something like that. No, I think they had 19, actually. And they shut 8 of them immediately after Fukushima because Angela Merkel, who actually has a brain, is a chemistry professor, and was convinced by Fukushima that this was not a good idea. The French, however, have 55 reactors or thereabouts, and they have been talking, yapping about building more. But in the last couple of weeks, and Ron, you've probably followed this, they discovered major cracking in at least 2 plants, 4 reactors. Now, the big rap about the French industry has been that it's standardized. They have 50 plus reactors, but only 2 designs, which is lovely until you have a generic flaw in one of the reactors. And the 2, well, apparently 4 reactors that they've discovered cracks in probably means that half the French industry, the reactors are cracked. And they are now going to have to go, and the closure of these 4 reactors, apparently these are pretty serious cracks. The closure of these 4 reactors is going to significantly impact French electricity supply this winter. They're very dependent on electricity in France in the winter. And unlike us, where we're especially in California, where we're, energy hogs in the summer because of air conditioning. So if in fact these 4 reactor cracks turn out to impact half the reactors in France, they might be reconsidering building new reactors. I mean, it would be a major impact on the French reactor industry. I don't have to tell you if they have to shut half their reactors. So this is a pretty big deal, and we need to keep our eyes on it. Linda Seeley in San Luis Obispo, it's something that I'm sure you're aware of and should be talking about, because all these years everybody's saying, "Oh, look how wonderful the French industry is." They were at 80%, they're down to 70 now, and they're going to go lower if these cracks prove to be endemic. Ron, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just that I think endemic describes what we've seen in the United States with Westinghouse reactors, which I believe you might have one of out there. And this is a prevalent problem because most of these reactors really weren't considered to be operated for the number of years that they actually have been operated. And it's not likely that they would work.
Well, Linda, are the reactors at San Luis Obispo, I can never remember, are they Westinghouse or General Electric?
I can't remember. Westinghouse, I think.
Well, listen, you should look into this, because if those are Westinghouse reactors, and I think they are, the French industry is all Westinghouse reactors. There's two sizes, but they may be very similar to Diablo Canyon. And if they've had a cracking problem serious enough to force them to shut 4 reactors, this might be relevant to Diablo Canyon.
Oh, yeah.
So I think you should take a look. Just go ahead and Google. And of course, this has gotten zero coverage. I mean, zero coverage in the American media. I just happened to pick it up on a nuclear site. But, the fact is that if there are 4 Westinghouse reactors in France that are cracked, they are almost certainly very similar to the 2 reactors at Diablo Canyon. And this is, go ahead, yeah.
I'm looking it up right now.
And this is something that, this is an issue because the French, God knows, would not be shutting any of their reactors if this wasn't really serious.
It's Westinghouse.
Yes.
They are Westinghouse.
Yeah, they're pressurized water reactors. And there are all sorts of things that can go wrong. And if these 4 reactors in France, well, they will be very similar to Diablo Canyon. So I mean, you should do the basic look-see in terms of a potentially generic problem here, because if
no kidding.
You got the problem in France with a Westinghouse reactor, they're not all that different worldwide. They're 2 different sizes, but otherwise they're the same. I mean, the reactors at Fukushima were General Electric, boiling water. But this is worth looking into. So I'll send you some information and we'll take a look. Okay?
Yes, and they are Westinghouse. And now I'm really very much more concerned. So Mothers for Peace have to look into this and see how similar the 2 designs are.
Yes, and you'll have to maybe find somebody who reads French. I studied French 5 years, and I can barely order dinner. But because the Americans are not covering this at all. You're still seeing about how the French are considering building more reactors. They've had one under construction in France for years and years. It's Flamanville. It's almost as bad as the Vogtle plant in Georgia, which is still, it's over 30 billion now. They're still they're talking about 22, 23, 24. They might open it. I mean, the 2 of them. I mean, it's insane. And then the French have had this very, very parallel situation in a place called Flamanville, and Finland has Olkiluoto, And all the reactors under construction, at least in the West, are complete disasters. So, but this would be a big deal, Seeley. So let's stay in touch on this. And
yeah, we'll do.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, go out and have some French food. Watch your cholesterol, though. And let's talk again, okay? And if you find anything, I'm gonna do this in the same slot next week. So if you come up with significant findings, let's talk about it again next week, okay?
So, and Happy New Year.
You know, tomorrow's my birthday, by the way.
His birthday.
Oh, that's right. Happy birthday.
So go out and get drunk and have a great day on my birthday. Or at least Okay, Linda. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again. That's Linda Seeley, my buddy from Cleveland, transplanted to San Luis Obispo, California, on the case at Diablo Canyon. And let's get that thing shut before they refuel it, for God's sakes. Take care. We'll talk to you again.
You too, Harvey. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, now we're with the great Ron Leonard. Leonard, Ron, great to see you. They are in the midst of trying to kill rooftop solar here in California. There seems to be no end to these morons. So if can fill us in, please, on what they're trying to do.
Well, happy to the new year, or New Year's battle as we consider it. And the fun story is the bastion of the industry. The thing that started the industry to be actually something that had thousands of people in the United States employed was residential solar systems. And what made residential solar systems work? They suddenly became legal, generally in the late 1990s. And by legal, I mean that when lots of people hooked up solar back in the day, they sort of plugged things in, but it was connected to the utility and it really wasn't monitored correctly, or really wasn't hooked up in the most swift way. But in the 90s, we came up with these inverters that were UL rated, and the system actually only stayed on unless there was power from the grid. So there was no problem with electricity hurting anyone. It was a legal system, and that legality enabled systems to be installed. Like in California, you have 1.3 million residential solar systems installed on people's homes.
Right, and that includes my son-in-law around the corner. And
there you go.
We bought a house out here, and we've been dithering because we can't afford to put the solar on until we sell our house in Ohio, but nonetheless. And you mentioned inverters. I just wanted to, for all you newbies out there, Ron, will you explain what an inverter does?
So there are two types of electricity. Let's say two flavors of ice cream. One is AC, which you have in the grid and that the utility provides to your house. And one is DC, like you'd get in a battery. A battery is DC power, but so is a solar collector. That solar collector produces direct current. That's what we're talking about. That's sort of the old Edison electrical system that was done in the late 1800s, DC power. And that power is converted to line voltage and 60 cycles, the sync to the grid power, by this thing called an inverter. It's a magic box in your basement that the solar collector is connected to, and it monitors the power flows. It optimizes the amount of power coming in from the solar system and converts everything to AC so your household system can use it.
And I'll tell you, since I'm a historian, I'll have to bore you with this, but when Edison invented electricity for commercial use, it was DC, it was direct current. It only went straight from one source to another. And it did not travel well. He couldn't get it to go very far. And so he had an assistant named Nikola Tesla. And he challenged Tesla. He told Tesla that if he figured out how to make electricity travel farther, he would give him $50,000, which is at the time was a fortune. Still is, but nonetheless. Yeah. And Tesla figured it out by inventing alternating current, which boomed back and forth. And that worked for long distance transmission. And he went to Edison and said, here's AC current. And Edison said, screw you, and wouldn't pay him. And that's why Tesla went out with AC, which still works today. And Edison was stuck with DC. And there's a whole other story that goes with that we could maybe tell later. Nonetheless, okay, so the inverters on your rooftop make the solar usable in your home and can go back into the grid. And that's been going on successfully.
Yeah, it's been going on successfully forever. And the other new wrinkle in the ball game here is people have figured out, especially in California, that power from the grid isn't always that reliable. You know, sometimes you have fires and sometimes you have overusage, and boy, they have rolling blackouts and my power may not stay on. What am I going to do? I'm working from home. This is COVID. Oh my God. Well, people have hooked up batteries to that inverter, and that battery provides DC electricity back to the inverter, and the inverter connects that DC electricity, flips it over to AC electricity, and powers your house. And the magic in that whole system is normally when a solar system is connected to the grid through an inverter, the inverter has to see grid power. Otherwise, it shuts everything off. Well, the new inverters have the ability to take battery power and form its own grid in the house and isolate the house from the outside grid. And wow, power goes off. Not in my house. I'm good. I can work. I can live. I can do everything I want. Well, that adoption of batteries in California residential solar systems was only like maybe 10%. And then we had these little problems with fires, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the battery adoption went up to 60%. And there are some solar companies in California that only sell a solar battery system. And that may be a little bit threatening to a monopoly utility.
Let's put it this way: it's a death knell for the utility industry. If you can not only get solar, from the sun, and have a battery in your basement, you have no need because we don't have basements here in Southern California, but somewhere you don't need the utility company at all, and that's terrifying to them.
It's called walking with your feet. People have realized that, wow, a commodity product that's dirty, delivered by a business which is a monopoly that doesn't care about me and raises my price every year for dirty power and inept service, maybe there's another way out. And that's what the residential solar system enabled people to look at. It was a way of saying goodbye to a service that really wasn't serving them very well.
Right.
And the utilities are very concerned about that. And they sort of made that concern evident by action that they did, which you can't see quite so well here, but I'll share it with Harvey. There are a whole bunch of states magically looking at this thing called net metering. And net metering, will explain, is a fair trade. If you have excess electricity from that solar system in your house and you're out, carousing around town or doing something else and not using that amount of electricity and don't have a battery to put it in, you put it on the grid and your local neighbors get the benefit of electricity. And net metering allows a fair trade. If you put energy on the local grid and you need to buy back more energy later on, say at night when the solar is not running, you do it at a swap price, a fair swap price. And that enabled the payback of a solar system to be reasonable. And that it's starting in California, New York, Florida, Minnesota, Connecticut, New Jersey, South Carolina, and Arkansas. Who's next to be examined for whether net metering sort of makes sense for the utility? Probably not in every one of those states. And these things all of a sudden happen magically at once because people have figured out, well, if solar is becoming less costly and it provides a reliable service and I have to work from home, I really want to be able to keep the lights on and keep the internet working. Well, this is a good deal for me. I probably should do that. And then magically, California passes a law that says any new construction, if you build a new house in California, you have to put solar on that roof. Light bulbs go off. Bad light bulbs for the utility.
Yes, they see. It's called doom. It's called the end of their industry. So so this net meter. Well, what exactly, Ron, are they now doing to try and stop and kill the solar industry?
Well, it's an interesting little game. And it all started with this crazy idea that I think some consulting company came up with. It's sort of a concept that they use and bandy about, and all of them use exactly the same words, which is this cost shift scenario. And the cost shift that they say that's occurring is that solar on people's homes is being subsidized by other ratepayers, and specifically those ratepayers of the low-income or moderate-income people who can't afford solar. Well, there's a little problem with that logic tree. It's false, for one, because solar on the grid actually supports the grid itself in your neighborhood and benefits all ratepayers. And there's been a study by a guy that formerly was a utility guy, Colorado, in California, showing how much money that actually does benefit the grid in California. But the falsity of the statement relies on the simple fact that 40% of solar installs in California are on low to moderate income homes. It's actually benefiting those people who the utilities claim are hurt by putting solar on people's homes. It's actually giving those people who are having the most impact on their monthly bill go away. They can get basically free electricity from the sun if they put a little bit of money out and buy a solar system and put it on their house, rather than monthly, yearly see these incredulous billing thing increase. So the idea was, how do we stop that? And they came up with a wonderful solution, which we call the solar tax. And functionally, this tax does two things. They say that they're going to use this money that they get back from anybody who puts a solar system on for some special purpose, like helping poor people. But we are already helping poor people by having solar on their roofs. And we're also helping poor people who don't have solar on their roof by putting 1.3 million solar roofs in California, because that reduces the cost of electricity for every ratepayer to the tune of millions of dollars, actually billions of dollars. So the first gamble is, let's tax solar, but it'll be a gradual tax. It won't hurt so much. But then they came up with the other good idea, which is that anybody who puts solar on their roof is now instantly going to be on a demand metered rate. And when you add those two things together, it's very likely that it's going to cost you more to put a solar system on your roof than it would be to buy electricity from the monopoly utility. So that's the way it can be killed. It can be killed by 1,000 cuts. And that seems to be the plan.
Technologically, Ron Leonard, we're talking with Ron Leonard, one of the great experts and players in the solar industry. Technically, what is happening with solar? Is it continuing in pure technological terms to get cheaper?
So as of up until COVID, let me put it to you that way, year in, year out, solar has dropped down in price. In the last 2 years, it's either been flat or slightly above. That really, for lots of different reasons, hasn't hurt the residential solar system business as much as it's hurt the large solar farms that you see out in the hinterland someplace, because the residential solar systems was labor intensive and they didn't have that many panels up on the roof anyway. So the percentage cost or the price increase of the solar panels didn't really kill anything, but it hurt a little bit. And then COVID came along, and in the beginning of COVID, like in New York State, they shut down the installations of solar systems, and it did hurt installation systems in general, because people need to go to your house and look inside your roof. And when COVID was ramping up, people just didn't want to do that. But even with all those obstacles in place, what occurred in California, at least, was that the industry managed to have probably a 20% increase year over year in terms of its business. And that was probably fairly exciting to see, if you were a monopoly utility, that thing really has legs. It really has the ability to keep on in terms of adverse conditions that are very onerous. No one's ever seen anything like this in the real world, and still provide the value that people really want, and they're going to buy it no matter what.
And how about with the Chinese? What's the dynamic with the Chinese and the supply of panels?
So the interesting thing that happened is after basically 2009, when we were the leader of manufacturing solar panels in the world, and obviously it was invented here. Harvey told a little story about how Edison invented the commercial production of electricity by a utility in Manhattan in the late 1800s. Well, 2 years after that occurred, also in New York, the first solar electric system was installed in somebody's roof. And it was literally miles away from Edison's power plant. They probably knew each other. And all of this stuff was invented in the United States. We built up an industry in the United States. And then after 2000, 2001, 2002, a whole bunch of places, people, Chinese, Japanese, others, came to the United States and toured our plants. And they said, good idea. I should do that. And they did. In 2009, starting from nothing, China has surpassed our production of solar panels. And ever since then, never looked back. In fact, probably over 60, 70% of the worldwide production of solar panels are made in China at this point. Nothing wrong with that, except when you have a little problem with things like pandemics, or worse, you have a little problem with the relationship between two countries, the United States and China, or worse, when we find out that there is a possibility that slave labor was used in the production of the metallic silica, which is mined, and that metallic silica is turned into solar panels, and those solar panels are then offered up for sale in the United States. Wait a minute, that's not going to happen. We're not going to use slave labor to bring across the ocean panels possibly made by people who are not getting paid a living wage or any wage whatsoever. This all came about because China had decided that the Uyghurs, which is a bunch of people in the western part of China who are really more not quite Chinese in ethnic origins, they're probably more Turkish, have a problem with the Chinese government. I think the problem's more or less centered around not their ethnicity, but their religion. They're Sunni Muslims. And China decided they were going to be re-educated. And part of that re-education process, besides confinement, after re-education, scattered them around the country to be used for labor force. And this is how we think this has occurred, and not only in solar collectors, but in manufacture of cotton, and actually in the production of wine in China. A very unfortunate situation, but that occurred in the United States last year. We saw that was an issue. A law was put in place by customs to make sure that none of those panels arrived in the United States. And the little problem with that is that no one was really tracking at that time where the metallic silica was mined. And some places in China was mined normally. Some places in China was mined likely by these poor Uyghurs who were not being paid. Then customs was faced with the duty of enforcing an unenforceable rule or untraceable product, and they seized 100 megawatts of solar panels from one of the companies, and then they seized another 40 megawatts of solar panels from another country, and then all of a sudden China decided probably wasn't a great idea to ship solar panels to the United States until this was all straightened out. Other things occurred at the same time there, like COVID here, and also they had a problem with power in China. And that power actually came from coal-fired power plants, and they had a shortage of power in China, and they actually shut down the manufacturing of solar panels because of that. So all the worst of possible wonderful bad things occurred at once. And the result was an increase in the price of solar panel and a shortage of solar panels worldwide.
And how long will it take for that to ease up, you think?
Very good question. No one knows for sure, but the theory is twofold. One is that we are going to see a glut of solar panels. And that's good, except China had a relief valve, and the relief valve was that they were going to install as much solar panels as they want to in China and sop up some of that glut. Well, they've, I think, reached the installation limits. They intend to install, I think, 50 gigawatts of solar panels. They've done that before in 2000 in China on the ground, mostly now in Mongolia, and would sop up that. But we think that has been reached. We also see that the price of other commodities used to make solar glass, aluminum, steel for racks, those prices are also dropping slightly. So the answer to your question, Harvey, is we believe that in the middle of next year, we will see normalized pricing for all this material and availability ramp back up. In the meantime, things like car batteries, which are going to be needing to transfer away from fossil fuel and transportation, solar panel manufacturing will kick back up in the United States. Unfortunately, it really takes a couple of years to start from ground zero to put in a solar plant, but some solar plants still exist in the United States. The largest one is a company euphemistically called First Solar, and they intend to double their production in the United States. One of the places that they will be doubling it is in Ohio, and they think they'll get to 6 gigawatts from where they started was 3 gigawatts. And that is an interesting scenario because even though that they were going to double their production, they are in effect sold out. Wow. We have so much demand worldwide that it's gone.
Well, real quickly, Ron Leonard, how do people get a hold of you, by the way, if they want to find out more?
Well, just take a look at the internet site that I have up, which is the renewableenergycoalition.org, and there's forms in there. You can ask questions about this. What we should be doing in terms of dealing with this problem in Ohio and New York and all these other states that net metering is being attacked on is get to Governor Newsom and tell him that unless we have residential solar, we're probably not going to reach the goal of 100% renewable energy in California or in New York. And in fact, residential solar is actually supporting the grid for everyone and is going to contribute billions of dollars to the grid on a yearly basis. So there is no cost shift. There is actually a cost benefit for having residential solar. And it also employs people, and it also is the right thing to do.
You got it. And we're almost out of time. Real quickly, Ron, the other issues are mining, lithium and cobalt in particular. What's
Cobalt? Yeah.
What's the situation with that?
Well, lithium mining really hasn't reached any limits per se yet. And the real issue is, can battery manufacturers switch away from cobalt as a mixture of their package? And frankly, Tesla has done most of that work and succeeded. I think every one of them are going to do the same. And it's not impossible to do. The chemistry is doable, and in fact may actually have benefits for the long-term viability of those batteries. So why not do it? It's going to save money. It's going to make the battery more stable. So let's get on with it. That was Tesla's decision. I assume that the next step beyond that, which makes this elimination of cobalt in batteries, is going to be from a thing called a solid state battery. Normally a battery is made of many layers, and the active layer with the lithium in it is sort of semi-liquidish. One way of making a battery they call a candy roll. It looks like a roll-up egg roll candy type thing. Another way is a prism cell, which is a flat pack. Both of those two things can be made in a solid state. Think of it as a big hunk of glass, and that's the battery. And that type of battery, which we'll be seeing in 2 years, will be dominant. It will be less costly. It will have unlimited ability to be discharged and charged. And yes, it will cost less.
What's that?
It will cost less.
Wow. And it won't have cobalt in it.
It's likely not to need cobalt with present technology, yet to be proven, but in the lab, it seems to work.
Fantastic. Well, Ron Leonard, it's really an honor to have you with us here, and it's good to hear that the solar industry is still booming. One other thing I've been interested in, the issue of desert-based or arid areas with solar panels. I've seen some stuff arguing that if you make the racking of the solar high enough, you can actually grow crops under the solar panels that are shade crops and very valuable. Have you seen much of that?
Yeah, and it's becoming extremely popular. First popularized in Japan, and there's an actual sort of rule of thumb. The rule of thumb says 1/3 solar panels, 2/3 crop. Now, picture a
2/3 what?
2/3 growing things. In other words, if you have if you had a square foot and you had 1/3 of that square foot covered by a solar panel, you would have the ability to grow in 2/3 of that same area and have no effect on the growth of that crop. So they have been doing that in Japan for a decade, and now it is being promulgated and used quite successfully everywhere, including Germany. Germany really doesn't have a lot of sunlight, sort of equal to, I don't know, Alaska. You ever been in Hamburg in the spring? There's not a lot of sun. And they've successfully done agro-photovoltaic in Germany, and it works well. It can be done. It makes sense to do. And actually, it's another way of giving farmers an extra income and another way of enabling family farms to survive and thrive.
Fantastic. Of course, in Germany, you have to choose between hops and pot, but nonetheless. Okay, Ron Leonard, I think we're just about out of time. It's really been great having you. I hope you'll come back, and let's have some more good news, hopefully about renewables. But it's good to hear. Thank you, crew in New York. Thank you, Ron Leonard. Thank you, Linda Seeley, for being our guest today. And thank you, PRN, Progressive Radio Network, for putting this out. This has been Harvey Sluggo Wasserman at the Solartopia Green Power and Wellness show, and we will be back again next week with another show on energy before we resume the grassroots emergency election protection calls on January 10th.
Hey, Harvey.
Yes.
No nukes, and happy birthday.
Thank you very much. We will see you on next week. Take care.
Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from what we conceived? Either way, we got what we needed when the sun shone.